name is Rick Lewis. I served as police chief in 3 different Oregon cities over the course of 28 and a half years. I served first in Union, which is Union County in eastern Oregon, for two years. Then I served 12 years as the police chief in Bandon on the South Coast, and then 14 years as chief in Silverton. And I was president of OACP in 1991. Yeah, it's pretty easy to remember what was going on at that time. When in 1991, when I was first vice president, the president at that time was Tom McCann, and Tom got called up for Desert Storm. And so he was in the Navy Reserve at that time, and he was called up to active duty. And so I ended up being president for 3 months of his term while he was called up before I became president. So I actually served for 15 months as president of OACP, and that's what was going on in the world at the time. And in Oregon, it was pretty much preparation for Desert Storm. And as far as OACP goes, at the time, we were not very solvent as an organization. We had, in fact, there was discussion, I can't recall whether or not we actually ended up borrowing money from the Sheriff's Association, or they offered, and we didn't need to. I can't remember which it was, but we were struggling at that time as an association with finances. We relied mostly at that time on magazine publishing for our income. The dues weren't that much at that time, and we didn't have many what we now call associate members. They were pretty much all police chiefs at that time, and I can't recall any. There may have been a few second in commands, but I don't recall any at that time. So it was pretty much just police chiefs, and so our income was from the magazine publishing, and it was very challenging to raise enough money through the magazine to keep the organization solvent. And we didn't have, as I said, we didn't have a legislative presence, and so we were pretty much more of a fraternal organization, and just we did the regular training. We had an education and training committee at the time, but we focused pretty much on training, and we had the first day of the conference was always firearms and golf. Okay. So it was more a social gathering than and training, those two together. So.
Okay. When was it that the association started to get involved legislatively?
It was after Victory Group came. We didn't have, we had a little bit of a presence, but we didn't have a lobby effort over there, and so we kind of worked with the Sheriff's Association to try to have some semblance of a presence there, but it wasn't much. And so we always found ourselves having bills thrust at us after they were voted in, and we didn't even know they were coming. So all the crime legislation would happen to us rather than us being involved in it. At that time, when I first joined the association, that was in 1984, when I became police chief in Union. And I relied very heavily on one particular individual as a mentor, and it was Jim Jones. Jim was the chief in Ontario at the time, and he was instrumental in getting me involved in the association, and within just a year or two, I think, after I joined the association, I was the district representative for that district over there, and Jim's mentoring and his helping me to develop leadership skills. I mean, being in Eastern Oregon and so far away from training, you either relied on a mentor to provide that assistance, or you did a lot of reading and learning about organizational skills and leadership on your own. And so we relied very heavily, I did at least, on the training that OACP provided at that time, because that's pretty much the only training that we saw on the east side of the state. Okay. And then as time progressed, then I had the opportunity then to mentor others as I moved moved elsewhere, and when I went to Bandon, I got really actively involved in the state issues. I was on the Asset Forfeiture Oversight Committee for 12 years and served on the Oregon Emergency Management Advisory Committee and LED's Advisory Committee and a bunch of others as I moved up in the association, going through the chairs and then into a leadership role in the association. From there, I moved to Silverton in 1998 to be the chief there, and retired in 2012. And within a short period of time, my wife was telling me I needed to find something to do. And I had a lot of people in the community that were wanting me to run for mayor. There was a lot of dysfunctional issues going on with the city council at the time, and I guess my tenure as police chief there, I got to know a lot of people, and they got to know what I was capable of doing, and I ended up with it was 90. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was a huge percentage of the vote for mayor, and I served one full term as mayor and ran unopposed for re-election, got elected, and then Representative Gilliam from our district had to resign due to his ALS illness, and I was approached by one senator and several other people in the community to file for Vic's seat, and so I did, and was elected by the Marion County and Clackamas County Commissioners to serve. And so that's where I'm at now. Jim was an interesting person. He had a long history with the association. I think he was also police chief for something like 30 plus years in Ontario. And when I first came to Oregon in 1979, I had served about 6 years in law enforcement in Wyoming before I moved out here. And I went to work for Jim for a very short period of time as a patrol officer in Ontario. And Jim immediately started working. Well, I think he did it with a lot of people, but with me, he started encouraging me because I'd been a lieutenant in Wyoming and had some law enforcement background and education. He encouraged me to start trying to move up in the ranks and so on. And after I became police chief, he encouraged me to get involved in the association heavily, including serving on Education and Training Committee and several others, but also to work to become the district representative over there. And all through my career in Eastern Oregon, he was constantly there helping, and all I had to do is make a phone call to him if I needed something. He was one of those very special people that gave more than he received, you know, and so I should mention too that when I became president of the Chiefs Association in '91, at that time we didn't have a past president as a board member, and we didn't have a past president's committee, and we also didn't have well, we had a historian, but it wasn't really anything that anybody was doing regularly. And I asked Jim to become the board member on the board of directors as past president, and he started that committee. And so, and you know, all through, even after Jim retired, if I had an issue that I knew Jim had knowledge and expertise in, I would call him. And he tried to steal me away from Bandon. He wanted me to go to Milton Freewater as a police chief. He was up there as an interim. And Jim never quit working. I mean, even after retirement, he was involved with Treasure Valley Community College and the criminal justice program and his entire life. And he had so much support and respect from people in power, Dave Frohnmeyer and a number of others, that just really looked up to Jim. And when you think about where he was in the state, on the Idaho border, away from everything basically that goes on in state government, everybody knew him. And so I do have to tell a story. When I decided to move from Eastern Oregon to Bandon as a police chief, we had a conference, I think, that year in Baker. And Jim had his comical side to him. he had a really good sense of humor. And Jim had these t-shirts or these sweatshirts printed up that said Eastern Oregon Chief, and he gave me one that had a big red X through the Eastern on it. And but yeah, he was always there to coach. He was always there to provide assistance. He didn't force it on you, but when you wanted something that you were struggling with, it could be something that maybe as a chief you were too close to the issue to really be able to see a logical way of handling it. You pick up the phone and call Jim, and Jim would say, well, try this. And it was just like, why didn't I think of that? I mean, it was so obvious. And Jim did that with a lot of police chiefs. And then, and I think the key is, especially for younger chiefs, is to take advantage of that knowledge and that expertise that retired chiefs have, or chiefs that have been around for a long time have, and take advantage of it. Don't feel don't feel ashamed to call and ask for help, because that's what they're there for. And I tried to do that with other chiefs as well. And then Mike Cahill and I, for example, we were over the years, I would call him and I'd say, I've got this issue and I can't quite figure out how to deal with it. And Mike would say, well, have you thought about this? And then he would do the same thing with me. And it's oftentimes the police chief is so close to the problem. They're dealing with the politics of it. They're dealing with the internal employee-employer relationship issues. They're dealing with just being too close to the problem to really see a solution. It's not anything they should be ashamed of. It's just the nature of the business. The stress gets to you, the other things get to you, and sometimes you just don't see one or more logical conclusions that or solutions to the problem. Pick up the phone and call somebody. And that's what I learned from Jim. Oh, I can think of a lot of them over the years. Some of them are not around, not with us anymore. But primarily, I think there were some chiefs in the districts that I worked in. John Courtney is a good example. John started in LeGrand after I was already chief in Union, and he and I got pretty close. But all through the years, I've bounced things off of John, even after he retired. There were Bob Shannon, when Bob was the chief in Hermiston many years ago. He was another one that I bounced ideas off of, or he kind of helped mentor me a little bit. Then when I got down on the South Coast, probably Mike in Junction City, Mike Cahill was probably the one that I talked to the most, and in Silverton. Well, by then, I suppose I knew it all. No. This profession can take its toll. It really can. And I can recall the time when the job was so important that I put it above family. And you cannot do that. I'm very fortunate that I still have a family, because I devoted so many hours and so much of the family time to the job, and I let it become the center of my life. You can't do that. And I learned, and I had a discussion with John Courtney, in fact, one night, and this was many years ago, and John asked me, what's the most important thing in your life, your job or your family? And for chiefs that are working right now, if you say it's your job, then you need to go back and look at your priorities, because that was my answer. And so after that conversation, I started thinking about, when you devote 20 or 30 years or whatever it is, 40 years to law enforcement and a number of years to your community as a police chief, when you retire, you get a nice thank you from the community, and then you go home to what's left of your family. So let the family be the center of your life. It has to be. And if you're grounded well in the family, the rest of it will fall into place. The other thing is that law enforcement's facing a really challenging time right now with what's going on around the country, and they're being attacked on all fronts. I would just remind chiefs that are still working that this isn't the first time this happened. It kind of goes in cycles. I can recall back when I started in 1973, there were issues with just getting past the race riots and all of the demonstrations that were going on, and were still going on at the time. And then later on, we went through the incident with Rodney King and different things that have happened over time that have put a bad light on law enforcement. It's got to be discouraging for young police officers. Where they really need the encouragement is from their chiefs, and they need to keep remembering that there is a whole lot of support out there for law enforcement, and the people that aren't really speaking up right now are the ones that are probably the majority, and they're the ones that support law enforcement. They support what law enforcement does to protect their communities, and they know what it would be like not to have that. And so they just need to keep a positive focus and remember that the officers need you. They need you to support them. They need you to garner public support for law enforcement, and just remember that there are a lot of people out there that really care. And don't let the stress get to you, because it will. And find a good positive outlet to relieve stress away from work. Don't let it be the focus of your life. You can create enough work for yourself to stay there for 12, 14 hours a day, and you don't need to do that. When the day is done, you need to go home to your family.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice.
Yeah.
And mentor one another, help one another when there are issues. Touch bases with your fellow chiefs, particularly in your district,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly new chiefs, because they do feel somewhat isolated for a while. Spend some time developing and developing those relationships, because they are crucial when things go wrong. And I want to say something too about agency review. We have that program through the Police Chiefs Association to help chiefs that want to have a review done of the agency, to just review policies, review practices, to make sure that you're staying current with trends. Don't wait until it becomes a problem in your community before you ask for that, because it can be detrimental at that point. But if you come in as a new chief, or if you've been there for a few years and there's nothing going on in the community that is adverse to law enforcement, ask for that review, because it will help the agency, it will help the chief, it will help the community to do that. And we have it, we offer that service, and I'd encourage chiefs to take advantage of it, especially if they move to a new city. It's the perfect opportunity to have an independent review done and come back with some positive suggestions for improvement. And we all need that from time to time. It's an honorable profession. It's probably one of the most honorable professions that there is out there. We need good police officers. We need people that are willing to come into the profession that have that desire to help people, and we need the right people. We need people who are good for the profession and good for their communities. And so for somebody that's maybe just out of high school or out of college, that's just an age where they are considering a career, take a close look at law enforcement. I mean, and don't dwell on the fact that things don't seem to be going well for law enforcement at times, because that changes. And it's been a great profession for me. I've enjoyed all 39 plus years that I was in it. And
that's great.
Yeah, I would just encourage, get involved in a reserve program or something and get your foot in the door, so that you know what law enforcement's about, and then they will help you decide
Yeah,
on whether or not it's a profession that you want.
yeah.
So,
Good advice, good practical advice.
and I was going to suggest too for the chiefs out there, consider running for political office. I mean, it's we have right now in the legislature, we have 7 members in the legislature between the Senate and the House that are former law enforcement.
Yes.
And we need a voice there. If we care about what goes on in the way of crime legislation and the community, what benefits the community, think about it, whether it's running for mayor, running for city council, running for state legislature or whatever. It's very rewarding to be able to continue public service in that area. So, and we've had a few that have done that over the years.
Yeah, that's excellent.